My sister Catherine and I were in a darling little shop looking at things, and we saw a whole series of garments, t-shirts, cardigans, that had holes cut in them and then fabric sewn in behind it. Now, they did it differently than I did, but I got home and I could not wait to try this out. This little t-shirt was one of my first attempts where the fabric was two-sided, so it was pretty obvious with the spots to add more dots using the back side. Then I wanted to see if it would work on a woven fabric. So on this little vest, I attempted it onto a woven fabric, and I did this very interesting way of seaming that I also discovered on a Paris garment, and you'll be seeing soon. It worked with the hole. And then, just most recently, I'm taking it now to another level. I wanted to make, this is one of my new patterns, and I wanted to have a little light wool, kind of a turtleneck sweater. So this is a wool double knit, which is fabulous for this technique because it's so forgiving. So here, the surface of the fabric was a little flat. So all I did was I stitched some scraps with a double needle, and then I used the same technique again. And notice where I put these circles. I put them up, like up on the shoulder, or there are other places on the sleeve. One day I'm going to set one in after the side seam has been sewn, so it goes front to back. A bigger one on the back with just a couple of lines of stitching. And this is my favorite way to sew. I did not know what else was going to happen until I continued working on the garment. As I was designing this little t-shirt, the bottom kind of reminded me of ribbing, but I didn't want ribbing all the way around, so I did just a few lines of the double stitching and really like what happened. I had the whole collar put on, and I had erred. Again, do I use the crosswise grain or the lengthwise grain? So here I am sewing a pattern that I designed in a fabric that I would say is pretty foolproof. I put the collar on, and I'd cut it on the lengthwise grain, and there just wasn't enough stretch. It was like, I could hardly get my head in. Okay, I'm going to rip it out and cut another collar, and there wasn't enough fabric. So look what happened. I had enough fabric to piece it and use the selvage. And you know what? It's more interesting. It came out better. So over and over again, this is a lesson I learned, is that these are one-of-a-kind garments, and no matter how carefully I plan ahead, things happen, and most of the time the design element works out better. So I'm much happier with the way it is now. So when I talk about experimenting with your scraps, this is what I do in my studio. I cut the pieces out, and then I realized it was pretty flat. It needed something else. I wasn't sure. So I got out the double needle, and I stitched on a scrap, and I did the circle inset, and it wasn't quite right. I tried putting just a piece of fabric on and doing some top stitching. Didn't like that. So I love to have a consult, and my sister Catherine was out in her studio. I went out, showed it to her. She right away, she looked at that and she said, oh, too many lines of stitching. Just one would be better. So if you take a look, and she was totally right. That works better than that. It's simpler. And then it was also her suggestion. She said, well, why don't you then carry it in somewhere else on the garment? Now, she didn't say to me, put it at the hem. But I sat with it and thought about it, and that's where I ended up putting it. So I really pay attention to, I love to have another eye. I pay attention to what the feedback I get from other people around me, even if they're not sewers, because everybody has that eye built into them. And a lot of times I'm just, I can't see the forest for the trees.